Welcome back to the channel, Have Trailer, Let's Travel. We are going to be exploring the Las Vegas, New Mexico historical markers. I have to tell you, I poured my heart and soul into looking through the history surrounding these markers. It really was one for the record book. So I really appreciate you coming and visiting the channel, but also really exploring what New Mexico has to offer. Let's have a look at those historical markers that tell a story you won't believe. And so we begin at the very beginning, the Guayanés River, where Francisco Vázquez Coronado, the Spanish explorer, crossed it in about 1541. He was looking for those legendary seven cities of gold. And this was part of his exploration through the Great Plains. But it was quite something to stumble literally on it and go, oh, wow, this is where they were in 1541. It really, really brought home to me how historic and old Las Vegas is in New Mexico. In 1821, William Becknell, known as the father of the Santa Fe Trail, led a small group of 6 traders from Missouri westward, seeking new opportunities for commerce. Near Puertocito de la Piedra Lumbre, they encountered over 400 Mexican soldiers, militia, and Pueblo Indians under Captain Guerrero's command. Though the meeting initially held some uncertainties, it ended peacefully, paving the way for Becknell's successful arrival in Santa Fe and the creation of a groundbreaking trade route. The moment marked the opening of the Santa Fe Trail, a crucial artery connecting the United States and Mexico. This trail played a transformative role in the economic and cultural development of the American Southwest, facilitating trade, settlement, and military movements. Today, the pivotal event is commemorated by the historical marker that you see here, and there's a monument placed by the Daughters of the American Revolution way back in 1910. These markers truly make us pause to say, this is how the West was won. And when I stood there, I was like, wow, this is it. And you need to stand there and honor William Becknell. Now, every man meets his moment. Stephen Watts Kearny was a prominent U.S. Army officer whose leadership played a key role in the Mexican-American War and the expansion of the U.S. He was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1794, and he was the youngest of 15 children. He attended Columbia University. He joined the New York militia. He served with distinction in the War of 1812, and he remained in the U.S. Army, and he became really the father of the U.S. cavalry. During the Mexican-American War, Kearny commanded the Army of the West, leading a group of troops, 1,700 actually, from Fort Leavenworth to Santa Fe. And in 1846, he secured the peaceful surrender of Santa Fe and established a civilian government. He contributed to the U.S. acquisition of California and overcame significant challenges at the Battle of San Pascal. Now, his legacy lives on here, but this is the Kearny Gap. This is where it happened. You can read the entire proclamation. And I also, in all of the slides, I will link you back to the historical marker database, and you can read more about it. But there are so many places in the United States that honor his legacy. There's Kearny, Nebraska, Kearny, Arizona, and significant contributions to monuments and places that are named Kearny in honor of this man who truly, almost without bloodshed, helped us acquire New Mexico. And really and truly, it is a testament to his bravery and his ability to lead. So I urge you to dig a little deeper into the words of Captain or General Kearny. So as the West was won, we needed some stores, and we have Frank Chapman to thank for that. Frank Chapman, he maintained a greenery and later a billiard parlor in the oldest structure. This structure here that you see is the actual oldest structure that was built in 1860. Eventually it would become a hardware store and a general merchandise by David Winternitz, who also was part of the major growth of this town. Let's have a look at both men. As mentioned before, we have Frank Chapman, who was born in 1834, passed away in 1880, so really and truly was there at the very beginning and died much too early. David Winternitz was born 1833 and lived to 1923, 90 years old, and was truly one of the pioneers at Las Vegas, New Mexico. Frank Chapman was the man with the vision who saw it and built that very first building. So both of them are to be honored in terms of their history and all that they gave to make this town what it became. So let's talk a little bit about these structures. We have the A. Dold and Company and Charles Emile Wesch general merchandise store that you see that is still there, built in 1870. And then we have the Dold block that was built just after the railroad came to town in 1881. And that was built for one of the brothers, Andreas Dold. And just amazing in terms of the fact that they had the capacity to build such buildings that would withstand the test of time. So both of them came from Germany, these brothers. Let's find out a little bit more about them. Let's get to know these brothers a little bit better. As a genealogist, y'all know that I'm going to go digging deep. And I did, and I found the 1860 census, which had Andreas and John on it. Both of them listed value of property at $75,000. Can you imagine in 1860 what that would represent? So they were living really high. Now, by 1862, a couple years later, they said, no, we don't want to be partners anymore. We want to go our separate ways. Don't know if that was acrimonious or they just decided they were going separate ways. Don't know. John would, and they both died fairly young. John died in 1877, and Andreas followed 5 years later in 1882. So they really kind of came and went like bright lights, but their legacy lives on. And now we come to the Baca building, built in 1884, right after that train came to town. And it really is kind of a territorial style architecture, and it blended Spanish colonial and American frontier with a little bit of Victorian design. So it's kind of a really neat building to look at. It plays a vital role in the Old Town Plaza, and it really stands as a testament to Las Vegas multicultural history, and it's an important place to kind of say, wow, look at all that happened in this one place. So we have the beginnings of it was O.L. Houghton's hardware store, and then we have the Appel brothers, who were mercantile people, and then we have Sabe's Confectionery, started in 1943. And just amazing the testament to how it changed hands, and then it was constantly part of the Las Vegas scene, if you will. Let's have a look at these families. So we begin with Oliver L. Houghton. He was a very prominent member, as you can tell by the fact that he was the very first occupant of that building. And, he did much in the way of creating the early part just after the railroad came to be able to say, okay, we're a real town, here's what we've got, let's make it happen. And he was involved in many legal battles as well, and just he was there. He was definitely a prominent person. And in fact, he contributed to the fund that was eventually created to help Sheriff Pat Garrett capture Billy the Kid, and we'll talk more about that later. But no, truly an inspirational fellow. The next family would be the Appel family, and this is Bernard and Isaac, who were prominent merchants in the late 19th century. He immigrated from Germany and arrived in 1888, and they would move to Las Vegas shortly thereafter and would spend approximately 30 years, and they became naturalized citizens. And he applied for a passport to visit his mother, and we actually get that picture from that passport. It was kind of neat to get that. And their enterprise really contributed to the economic prosperity because they sold all kinds of things. And so it was one of those where it's like families would come and they had everything that you could get in a store, you know. So it was very important that they were able to establish and thrive in this very, very small community. And you know, the fact that there's so many immigrants coming from all over, Germany definitely being one of them, and they would make a life for themselves. So it's just amazing. Now, the last family that I want to talk about is the Segura family, Segura. And Eusebio Saib Segura was a notable figure in Las Vegas. Here he is. In 1964, they were celebrating, or I think it was 1964, they were celebrating however many years they had been in business. And it was truly, your local ice cream parlor, your local drugstore, your local confectionery. That's what it was. So I am sure that many, many children who grew up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, remember this particular Save's Confectionery. And he would pass away actually very late in 1990. So, I mean, he really ran the gamut. Born in 1900, so he could have like literally met many of these people. So I think that's amazing to cover the entire history of Las Vegas, New Mexico in three families. E. Romero Hose and Fire Company was established in 1882, and it was New Mexico's first volunteer fire department. It was actually named after Don Eugenio Romero, who happened to be Las Vegas's first mayor and a truly key community leader. The original firehouse, built in 82 and reconstructed in 1909 after a fire, ironic. The two-story brick building, located at 155 Bridge Street, features a really unique architectural style with a large folding door for fire trucks and a pressed metal cornice. And it really is kind of amazing to see it live and in person. So that picture we took just this past October, and I was able to find this from, I think it was 1909 picture. So love just the fact that it really does kind of look the same. So let's have a look at Romero and who he was. So Don Eugenio Romero was born in 1837 and lived to 1918. He was a key figure in the development of Las Vegas, New Mexico, as both a successful merchant and a public servant. He was born in Santa Fe, and he began his career in trading and mercantile activities along the Santa Fe River. And I wanted to show you, I found this picture of him, just amazing, kind of very cowboyish. And then I was able to find a newspaper article. Don Eugenio Romero, on receiving the news that his stock had been driven off, immediately started in pursuit of the thieves, overtook them, and recovered his animals. I mean, this was the man, right? And he basically held many public roles. He expanded into lumber, stock raising, and rail contracts. He held the office of sheriff, of mayor for 4 years, and he was actually a territorial senator. So he was very, very instrumental in really establishing Las Vegas, not only from a business perspective, from a political one as well. So now we come to Ludwig William Ilfeld, who owned the hardware store, and it was this particular building that you see was originally a two-story building. It was built in 1913 and originally housed the hardware store of Marwood, Brumley and Company. And he eventually would join forces with Ludwig, and they would create together a store, and then ultimately Ludwig took it over. And it was restored after the 1913 fire. And so that is sort of the, I mean, when you look at these buildings, I mean, 1913 to 2024, I mean, that's 101-year-old old building. It's amazing to me that it still has withstood. Now, when I originally went to the Las Vegas Museum, I saw something about the importance of the Jewish, religion in Las Vegas. I really didn't understand. It was like, oh, okay, that's good. But when you really study the movers and shakers, you can begin to see how important they were. And the pioneer Ilfeld family really was. His uncle Charles, who we haven't talked about, was a very critical player in the early New Mexico, just building of it and all of that, and obviously Las Vegas. And they came from Germany, were Jewish, and they really established such incredible buildings and businesses that really, I think, put Las Vegas on the map. Now, one of the really neat things about Ludwig is he was just a man of many talents. He was a prominent merchant, and he owned things and all of that, but he was also a horseman, and he happened to be part of the fire department for 40 years, and he was part of the National Guard. During 1899, Theodore Roosevelt came to Las Vegas, New Mexico to celebrate the Rough Riders. We've talked about that in another video. And Ludwig lent him his horse, which began an entire, kind of relationship, to the point that Ludwig was invited to the 1904 inauguration of Roosevelt. So that was kind of like a neat kind of thing. And that is Ludwig's house that is there as well. And so we can really see that he was a truly inspirational figure. And I'm sure his descendants still live. I didn't go down that rabbit hole, but I'm sure his descendants live in or around Las Vegas, or some of them must, and with that kind of family connection. So really, really, we need to pay homage to Ludwig. So this particular structure was actually the very first structure to be built after the railroad came in 1880. And the person that came into the building in that period was J.N. Furlong, who happened to be a photographer. And he kind of set himself up at the hotel and eventually applied to be postmaster. And above the post office became his studio. He was very industrious. And he would end up being there until, I believe, the 1910s, when he would eventually retire to Berkeley, California, and he would pass away at the ripe old age of 86 in 1919. And this fire that burnt it down in 1913, would eventually create the bar that would become the Bridge Bar, and eventually, other businesses as well. But it was rebuilt in 1913 and still stands today. But I just love the fact that J.N. Furlong, took so many pictures, I'm sure, and many families and genealogists are looking at photographs today because of him. So I want to pay a little special homage to the photographers out there. So when the railroad came to town, you need a couple of things. You need a bar, you need a church, and you absolutely need a bank. And the First National Bank of Las Vegas was established in 1879, and it was one of New Mexico's earliest financial institutions. And then in 1880, the original building, this building was designed, and it became a central figure of the Las Vegas Plaza. And by 1925, the bank went into receivership. 3 years later, the Las Vegas Savings Bank took over the building and operated it as the city's sole bank until 1949. Today, the historic First National Bank building really stands as a landmark preserving the legacy of the financial enterprise that helped shape the growth of Las Vegas. And it remains really a testament to the city's architecture and economic prosperity during that time. So let's find out a little bit about these brothers. The Reynolds brothers, Jefferson, Joshua, and Frederick, were influential bankers who shaped the financial development of New Mexico and the Southwest in the late 19th and early 20th century. In 1876, they established the Central Bank in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and by 1879, they secured a charter for the First National Bank of Las Vegas, capitalized at $50,000. At that time, was amazing. Expanding their ventures, they founded the Central Bank of Albuquerque in 1878, even before the Santa Fe Railroad arrived, and later acquired the First National Bank of Albuquerque in 1881. Their reach extended to Texas, where they founded the First National Bank of El Paso. Individually, Jefferson, Reynolds played a leading role in founding multiple banks, including the Exchange Banks in White Oaks. Joshua became president of several institutions and would eventually lead the Reynolds Addition Company, a real estate firm. Frederick Reynolds, although less documented, was instrumental in the family's enterprises. Their banking institutions provided critical financial services during the transformative period in the Southwest. And there's actually Reynolds family papers are preserved at the University of New Mexico. So if you want to click on that link and go and find out more information, that is definitely something to do. Anyone who sews knows how important the Singer sewing machine was. Anyone who wears clothes, for heaven's sakes, knows that it was really critical in block that was established in 1882 by Wellington A. Gibbons, who was a local agent for the Singer Sewing Machine Company. He was the one who secured the ability to get those sewing machines to the people so that they could create their uniforms and their clothing and all of the rest of it, everything that a house and people need. And so it was very, very important. It's one of those small things in history that you sort of forget about, and then you go, wow, they really didn't have, your local Walmart. They had to create. And the sewing machine became a very, very important instrument in that evolution. Wellington Adair Gibbons was born in 1849 and died in 1923. So he lived a nice long life. He's best known as that local agent, but he was much more than that. He was a businessman, and he also served with great honor as the Grand Master of the Odd Fellows and contributing much to the social fabric of the community. His legacy endures through that Gibbons block, and truly, truly, when I discovered this, I went, wow, he was just much more than the Singer man, and I can only imagine all that he gave in order for the city of Las Vegas to be established. So the Clara Waring Bookstore in 1901, it was first built by Mary J. Woods and later Clara Waring, were the first to introduce bookstores in Las Vegas. And later in the 1930s, it carried on with Mrs. Bailey, who also operated a bookstore. Now, I just thought it was so neat, and forgive me for this, but I just love the fact that in the newspaper, they actually said Mrs. Clara Waring left on the early morning train for Chicago, Niagara Falls, and New York. She goes on business and will be absent from the city for about a month. So can you imagine? Like, here she is, a woman. They couldn't, write a check. But there she is, going on the train by herself, going on a business trip to possibly acquire new books and that sort of thing. And I just thought it was really neat because our stereotypical, women at home or a small business and that sort of thing. And there's this woman, she's making it happen. So I love that. So we have Mary Woods, who was born Clara Butt in Georgia and would make her way west with her husband, who passed away, leaving her with two young children. And she would be a bookseller, and then in turn would, according to the 1910 and 1920 census, operate a small hotel. By 1930, she had retired and would pass away in 1934. But obviously an entrepreneur. Clara Waring, her maiden name was Updegrove, was born in Kansas and came to New Mexico with her husband, who was working for the railroad. By 1910, Frank and Claire would move on. So she had the bookstore for a very short amount of time, probably a decade. And they would actually divorce in 1920. So that kind of tells me that she was not afraid of going it alone. She would again remarry to a local contractor named Phillips, O.W. Phillips, but by 1930 she's listed as divorced. At first I thought she was divorced from Frank, but then I saw the marriage, so actually she was twice divorced. So that is definitely someone who was a force to be reckoned with. I thought she was, I had lost track of her after the 1930s, but definitely was impressed by her ability to just keep going on. So definitely a woman ahead of her time. So here we come to another member of the business community who happens to be of Jewish faith, Isidore Stern, the Mark says famous dry goods store, built in 1881, again with that, 1879 train arrival being so prominent. This is the building as it looks today. And this is kind of his advertisement. You can see that he was really out there in terms of ads. I couldn't possibly show you all the ads, but I would look at an ad and there was an entire page ad and all it was his name. I've got this, I've got that, he was absolutely one of the greatest promoters I've seen so far. And so even in the newspaper, I'll just read it to you. As a Gazette reporter was hurrying up the street yesterday, he suddenly came to a halt in front of I. Stern's store. The trouble was the entire sidewalk was blockaded with boxes of dry goods, hats, caps, and shoes, gents' furnishings, and in fact everything neat and tidy, which is just being received. This is the result of Mr. Stern's late trip east. So, I mean, he was a mover shaker. There's no doubt about it. So Isidore was this mover shaker for sure, but he also was a mover shaker not just in business but in community and social and religious. He was one of the founders of the first Jewish temple in 1884 in Las Vegas, New Mexico. So that is just demonstrates that he lived large and he thought of everything. However, as I kept going researching his family and researching him, I came to an article that kind of stopped me in my tracks. Because as of September 27, 1898, he committed suicide. I have no other information. It was just one of those, you're turning the page, you're doing the research, and like, what? And very, very sad. It looks like there was some financial issues. And again, I did not go down that rabbit hole of trying to, I would spend, weeks trying to figure that out. But it was very, very sad to see that he was so despondent at the end of his life. But he absolutely gave so much, and I'm glad we have a historical marker commemorating his contributions. The next building we come to is the Maloof Hall. In 1921 it was built. It was built by the Maloof family, and it was really kind of an interesting thing because the Maloofs had come to America from Lebanon, and they came in 1896 with very little money, and by 1909 and 1914 they're moving and shaking and they're creating this building. Now currently the building houses a restaurant, which I didn't get a chance to go to when I was in Las Vegas, but trust me, now that I've done the history, I'm definitely going to be exploring El Rialto restaurants. So let's find out a little bit about this amazing family who came from literally nothing to creating something. So the Maloof family, as I said, came from Lebanon. Obaid Malouf would arrive here in the late 1890s and would begin to create his family. And by 1921, they had formed the Malouf Hall, and they would then, by 1924, he acquired the Whitmore House, which is the residence of the Maloufs and kind of symbolized that they had made it, you know. And the building, the Malouf Hall, which was theirs, it was eventually housing the El Rialto restaurant, which was established in 1975 and still to this day is there. And as I say, I really want to visit that restaurant. Now, when we look at the family, we begin to see the entrepreneurial spirit extended way beyond New Mexico. Eventually, by 1937, they had secured the distribution rights for Coors beer in the Southwest, laying the foundation for future ventures in the entertainment and hospitality industries. You can see that they were owners of the Sacramento Kings, of the Palms Resort in Las Vegas. They also have a media company as well. This is a picture of 3 of his grandsons, and the top picture is of Obaid, as far as I can tell, featuring a couple of his children. Just an amazing, amazing story to see them come from such humble beginnings and probably not speak the language. And we're definitely, you know, strangers in a strange place and made it their own. So I love that story. The next building you want to look at is the Plaza Hotel. It's an iconic historical landmark that has been a centerpiece of this community since the opening in 1882. And it was commissioned by a local businessman during the Las Vegas boom, you know, during that key time during the railroad. And it was nicknamed Belle of the Southwest. It became a gathering place for wealthy travelers, cattle barons, and prominent figures of the time. And it's said that it is haunted. So again, one of those things, I took the picture, you know, and I did but I didn't have time to go in and walk around. Trust me, there's another trip in my future for Las Vegas. The next building we're going to look at is Wheel and Graph, who operated as prominent commercial merchants in this town in the early 1880s. Their establishment offered a diverse range of goods, including groceries and agricultural products. For instance, in April of 1883, they advertised the arrival of 40,000 pounds of early rose seed potatoes, highlighting their role in supplying essential commodities to the local community. Additionally, in January of 1883, they promoted the sale of ground chili, and they were definitely instrumental in focusing their attention on local produce. And while they were really known for their mercantile operations, there's no evidence that they had a saloon. However, we have it on good authority that Dick Liddell and Robert Ford, who were former members of the James Younger gang, operated the Bank Saloon in Las Vegas. After their involvement in the gang, they ventured into legitimate businesses by opening this establishment on Bridge Street. However, the saloon was very short-lived. It quickly went out of business. Following this, Liddell leased the billiard room at the Plaza Hotel, while Ford briefly served as the city policeman before leaving Las Vegas. Do you see how the history kind of, crosses? On April 3rd, 1882, Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head while James was adjusting a picture frame in his home in St. Joseph, Missouri. Liddell eventually turned informant against Jesse James and others after being captured. His testimony was critical in implicating the gang members in their criminal activities. I just love when I get to see history come to life in a small town. So the Wells Fargo Express office, built in 1881, again, you needed a saloon, a bank, a hotel, and you need a Wells Fargo Express office. And it was built in 1881, just after the railroad came to town. And the Wells Fargo business, would act as a shipping and receiving point for goods. It facilitated financial transactions. It provided logistical support to the businesses and mining operations. And, we can't say enough about how important Wells Fargo's operations were critical for creating that flow of money and goods. The Veeder Block is a historic building located at 1809 1813 West Plaza in Las Vegas, New Mexico. It was constructed in 1895 by the brothers Elmer and John Veeder, who were prominent attorneys and community leaders. And originally, the Veeder brothers resided on the second floor, while the first floor housed the grocery store. The Veeder Block is part of the Las Vegas, historical district, and definitely was part of the the essence of the town. In popular culture, this block gained recognition for its portrayal in the television series Longmire from 2012 to 2017, and it has been the scene of quite a number of movies and television shows. So it just kind of embodies the out there Southwest. Whenever I can find pictures, real pictures, of the people that I talk about, I love to showcase them. So this is their obituaries and also recent pictures. We have Elmer on the right, who died in 1922. And then John, who's actually older, died in 1932, lived a really long life. And both of them were lawyers. Both of them were basically buried at Las Vegas, but they came to New Mexico from New York, and were amazing in the sense that here were these Dutch brothers, because Veeder is definitely Dutch, and they can trace their ancestry right back to that early colonists in New York. So in their blood was that feeling of wanting to pioneer something, and they did. So I love to honor them. This was the very first historical marker I came up to. It's right near the Las Vegas Museum, the Historical Museum, where we started our tour. And I just couldn't believe Dr. Meta Christie, born 1895 to 1968, and she was the first African-American osteopathic physician and the first Black graduate of the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. She earned her degree in 1921. She practiced for a while in Indiana and later came to Las Vegas, New Mexico, where she provided care to underserved communities. And she treated people of all races and colors. And she earned the Distinguished Service Award and from the New Mexico Osteopathic Medical Association, and remained honored today with awards and historical markers like this. Her resilience and dedication inspire us all, really, because she had a dream and she just kept at it. So thank you so much. I just love when I discover a crossroad between what I'm doing and something else that I've learned about. And that happened with Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, who are central figures in the lore of the American Old West, with notable events that connected them to Las Vegas. In December of 1880, after a series of pursuits, Sheriff Pat Garrett captured Billy the Kid along with his associates at a place called Stinking Springs. Following their capture, Garrett transported the prisoners to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and where they arrived on December 26, 1880. They were met, of course, by a huge crowd of very curious onlookers. The next day, an armed mob gathered at the train depot demanding custody of one of the prisoners, David Rudabaugh, who was wanted for the murder of a local deputy. Garrett stood firm, refusing to surrender him, and successfully de-escalated the situation, ensuring the prisoners remained in custody. Following Billy the Kid's capture, the citizens of Las Vegas, New Mexico raised funds to reward Sheriff Pat Garrett and his posse for their efforts. On December 30th, 1880, local businesses and individuals contributed various amounts. During this time, Billy the Kid did escape, and they did catch up with him, and he was finally killed that in 1881 by Pat Garrett. But I just wanted to show you that in the places where I've highlighted, these are places that we talked about in this video. So we have the First National Bank, we have Charles Ilfeld, we have the T. Romero and Son, we have the O.L. Houghton, we have Isidore Stern, we have Marwood Inter and Company, and we have Andres Dold. All of these people we've talked about, and there's probably more that are, I didn't recognize the names, but can't you just imagine? Like, there you are living in this time, and they won't give Pat enough money, and so the people are like, well, we need Billy. We don't want Billy the Kid in our town, so we need Sheriff to be able to have all the assets and all the the support he needs. So they gathered together and gave him money. I love those stories. That is just can-do attitude, and that's kind of what Las Vegas really represents to me. Thank you so much for watching. I really have enjoyed getting to know Las Vegas, New Mexico a little bit better, and I can't wait to return and explore it more. I hope you've enjoyed it and that has inspired you to explore either Las Vegas or your own neck of the woods. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to, what places you'd like me to explore next. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.